Have you ever wondered, my dears, how a single night can shape the course of an entire lifetime? How one moment of truth can either build you up or tear you down so completely that you spend decades trying to find your way back to yourself? Some people say our wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. But what happens when that sacred night becomes the beginning of your greatest nightmare? I've asked myself these questions 1,000 times over the years, sitting in my garden with my tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. And you know what I've learned? Sometimes the worst betrayals come wrapped in white lace and promises of forever. Sometimes the person standing beside you at the altar is already planning how to destroy you. My name is Margaret. I'm 76 years old. This story happened in 1967. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. It was supposed to be perfect, my dears. Absolutely perfect. I grew up in Millbrook, a small town in Yorkshire where everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least they thought they did. The kind of place where Mrs. Henderson at the post office knew what you were having for dinner before you did, and where Sunday service at St. Mary's wasn't just about prayer, but about seeing and being seen. My father owned the local pharmacy, and my mother was known throughout the county for her prize-winning roses and her charity work with the church. I was 22 when I married Robert Ashford in June of 1967. Robert was 28, already established as an accountant at the most prestigious firm in town, Hartley and Sons. He was handsome in that clean-cut way that made mothers approve and daughters swoon. Dark hair always perfectly combed, crisp white shirts that smelled of starch and cologne, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He came from old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. His family owned half the farmland surrounding Millbrook. Our courtship was proper and traditional. He'd take me to the cinema on Friday evenings. I remember we saw The Sound of Music 3 times, because he said watching me enjoy it was better than the film itself. We'd have dinner at the Rose and Crown, where Mr. Patterson, the owner, always saved us the corner table by the window. Robert would order for both of us, always knowing exactly what I'd like. Looking back now, I can see how he was already making every decision, but at the time, I thought it was romantic. I thought it meant he cared. The wedding was everything a young girl could dream of. 300 guests filled St. Mary's Church. My dresso, my dears, it was exquisite pure white satin with seed pearls sewn into the bodice. A 10-foot train that my 3 bridesmaids carried down the aisle. I can still smell the lilies that filled every pew, mixed with the scent of my mother's Chanel No. 5 as she kissed my cheek. Before walking me down the aisle, Father Michael conducted the ceremony, his voice booming through the church as he spoke about the sacred bonds of marriage, about trust and fidelity, and building a life together. Robert's hands were steady as he slipped the gold band onto my finger. Mine were trembling with excitement, with love, with the certainty that I was the luckiest woman in the world. When he lifted my veil to kiss me, everyone applauded. Mrs. Henderson actually cried. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of my forever. The reception was held at the Ashford Estate Acres of Manicured Lawns, a Victorian manor house that looked like something from a storybook. We danced our first dance to Unchained Melody, and I felt like I was floating. My father gave a speech about how proud he was, how he was gaining not just a son-in-law, but a son. Robert's father welcomed me to the family with a toast that made everyone raise their glasses of champagne. We cut the 4-tiered cake with white fondant roses. We laughed. We celebrated. We were perfect. But you see, my dears, perfection is often just a mask covering something rotten underneath. The wedding night, that's when everything changed. We were staying at the Grand Hotel in London before flying to Paris for our honeymoon the next day. Room 412, I'll never forget that number. It was a beautiful suite with cream-colored walls, burgundy curtains, and a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. Rose petals had been scattered across the sheets. A bottle of champagne sat in a silver bucket, condensation dripping down its sides. Robert was quiet during the drive from Millbrook to London. I'd attributed it to exhaustion. It had been a long day, after all. But when we entered that hotel room, something in his demeanor shifted. His jaw was tight. His eyes looked distant, cold, even. Robert, I said, touching his arm, is everything all right? He turned to me then, and the look on his face, my dears, I can still see it clearly after all these years. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It was something else entirely. Something that made my stomach drop. We need to talk, he said, for words that would echo in my mind for decades to come. He sat down on the edge of that beautiful bed, still in his wedding suit, and he told me the truth, the horrible, devastating truth that he'd hidden from everyone for months, years, perhaps. I'm bankrupt, Margaret, completely and utterly broke. I laughed at first. I actually laughed because it seemed so absurd. Robert came from money. His family had wealth going back generations. He had a good job. We just had a wedding that cost more than most people earned in 2 years. But he wasn't joking. The business failed 6 months ago, he continued, his voice flat, emotionless. Bad investments. I borrowed heavily from your father's business account. He gave me access to help with the wedding expenses. I've taken out loans in your name. I've mortgaged property that doesn't exist. The wedding, this hotel room, all of it paid for with money I don't have. Money that's now your responsibility, because as of 3 hours ago, you're my wife. Everything I owe is now legally yours too. The room spun. I gripped the bedpost to steady myself. What do you mean? In my name? The papers you signed last month? The ones I said were for opening our joint bank account? Those were loan documents. £20,000 worth. Due within 6 months. £20,000. In 1967. That was enough to buy 3 houses. It was a fortune, an impossible sum, but your family cut me off months ago when they found out what I'd done, he said, finally showing some emotion, anger, raw and bitter. My father said I'd brought shame on the Ashford name. They won't pay a penny toward this. It's all on us now. On you. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do this? He stood up then, straightening his jacket, and the coldness in his eyes intensified. Because I needed a way out. Marriage to you gave me access to your father's money, his credit, his reputation. You were convenient, Margaret. Your father trusted me. Everyone in that God-forsaken town trusted me. They never questioned a single signature. Little did I know, my dears, that this was only the beginning of the nightmare. Robert walked to the door, picked up a suitcase I hadn't noticed before, and turned back to me one last time. I'm leaving for America tonight. I have a flight at midnight. By the time anyone figures out what's happened, I'll be gone. You'll deal with the consequences. You'll tell everyone I had a business emergency, that I'll be back soon. Buy me time to disappear. You can't, I said, tears streaming down my face, my wedding makeup running in black rivers down my cheeks. Robert, please, I can and I am. You're my wife now. That means something legally. They can't come after me without coming through you first. By the time they sort it all out, I'll have started over somewhere new. He left, just walked out of that hotel room and out of my life, leaving me standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by rose petals and champagne. With my entire world crumbling around me, I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat on that bed until dawn, trying to understand how I'd been so blind, so stupid, so trusting. When the sun finally rose, I checked out of the hotel, took a train back to Millbrook, and walked into my parents' house still wearing my wedding gown. The look on my father's face when I told him what Robert had done, that look haunts me still. Within 2 weeks, the full extent of the disaster became clear. My father discovered that Robert had systematically stolen from the pharmacy over the past 8 months. Not just the wedding money, but operating capital, supplier payments, everything. The business was ruined. My father, who'd worked 40 years to build that pharmacy, had to file for bankruptcy. He was 63 years old. The loans in my name started coming due. Letters arrived daily, brown envelopes with red stamps, threatening legal action, seizure of assets, prison. I had nothing to pay them with. Robert had been thorough in his destruction. But you know what was almost worse than the financial ruin, my dears? The shame, the whispers, the looks. Mrs. Henderson at the post office stopped speaking to me. She'd hand me my letters with pursed lips and disapproving eyes, as if I'd committed the crime myself. The ladies at Churchwomen I'd known my entire life, women who'd cooed over my wedding dress and wished me happiness across the street to avoid me. I became a pariah overnight. She must have known. They whispered, "No woman is that naive. Probably in on it from the start." Someone else would say. The family always seemed too perfect. My mother stopped going to her charity meetings. She couldn't bear the humiliation. My father aged 10 years in a month, his shoulders hunched, his eyes hollow. I destroyed my family by being foolish enough to trust the wrong man. The worst came when Father Michael, the same priest who'd married us, came to visit. I thought he was there to offer comfort, guidance, spiritual support. Instead, he sat in our living room and said, "Margaret, this situation is unfortunate, but you made vows before God. Robert is still your husband in the eyes of the church. Perhaps you should try to contact him. Work this out. A wife's duty is to stand by her husband." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "He destroyed my family," I said quietly. "He stole everything we had. He committed fraud in my name. Marriage is about forgiveness," Father Michael replied. "About sacrifice. Perhaps this is God's way of testing your faith." That's when something inside me broke, but also something else awakened. A strength I didn't know I possessed. "Get out of my house," I said. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out." I stood up, my voice rising. "Don't you dare come into my home and tell me to forgive the man who destroyed my life. Don't you dare use God to justify his cruelty and your cowardice. Get out." He left, sputtering about respect and propriety. But I didn't care anymore. I was done caring what people thought. I had to survive. The next 3 years were the hardest of my life, my dears. The courts eventually tracked Robert down in Chicago, but by then he'd started over with a new name, a new life. The extradition process would take years and cost money we didn't have. The debts were legally mine as his wife. I couldn't divorce him without his cooperation, and he refused to sign any papers. I was trapped in a marriage that had lasted one night but would haunt me for decades. We lost the pharmacy in 1968. My father got a job as a clerk at a grocery store, a man who'd been a respected business owner. reduced to stocking shelves for minimum wage. My mother took in sewing. I needed to work, but who would hire me? I was that woman who'd married a criminal. Nobody wanted that kind of trouble, so I did what I had to do. I took in laundry. You young people today might not understand what that means, my dears. It meant standing for hours over a wash tub in our basement, scrubbing other people's dirty sheets and clothes with harsh soap that made my hands crack and bleed. It meant carrying heavy wet laundry up the stairs to hang on lines in our tiny backyard, my back screaming with pain. It meant delivering clean, pressed linens to houses where women who used to be my friends would barely acknowledge me, thrusting money into my hand without meeting my eyes. I charged 3 shillings per load. On a good week, I made £2. It was barely enough to buy food, but I couldn't just wash clothes. I needed more. So I started baking. My grandmother had taught me to make treacle tart when I was a girl, her secret recipe, with golden syrup, breadcrumbs, and a hint of lemon zest. I'd make them in the evenings after finishing the laundry, using our old oven that didn't heat evenly, having to watch them constantly so they wouldn't burn. Then I'd cut them into squares, wrap them in wax paper, and sell them DoorDash to dash door. Do you know how humiliating it is, my dears, to knock on the door of someone you went to school with, someone who'd been at your wedding, and ask if they'd like to buy a piece of tart, to see the pity or disdain in their eyes, to have them close the door in your face? But some people bought them, Mrs. Winters, who lived on Grove Street, always bought 2 pieces every Wednesday. They remind me of my mother's baking, she'd say kindly, and those small moments of dignity kept me going. I also started tutoring, though I had to be secretive about it. Some parents didn't want their children associated with me, but a few desperate ones whose children were failing mathematics or English would hire me to come to their homes after dark. I charged 10 shillings an hour, and I was good at it. Really good. Word spread quietly among the parents, who cared more about results than reputation. My hands became unrecognizable. The soft, manicured hands that had worn Robert's ring became rough, calloused, covered in burns from the oven and cuts from the washboard. I'd look at them sometimes and barely recognize them as my own. I was 25 years old and looked 40. I cried myself to sleep most nights, but always silently, always with my face pressed into my pillow so my parents wouldn't hear. They had their own grief to bear. They didn't need mine to dart, but gradually, my dears, so gradually, I almost didn't notice things began to change. My treacle tarts developed a reputation. Mrs. Winters told her bridge club about them. Those ladies told their friends. Soon I wasn't just selling door to door. I was taking orders. I learned to make other things too, Victoria: sponge cakes, chocolate biscuits, lemon drizzle cakes. I bought a notebook and started keeping track of recipes, orders, customers. I became efficient, organized. The tutoring grew too. Quiet recommendations led to more students. I was helping 5 children by 1969, 10 by 1970. I saved every penny I could. In 1971, 4 years after that devastating wedding night, something remarkable happened. I was at the butcher's shop, counting out coins to buy a small piece of beef for my parents' dinner, when I overheard a conversation behind me. "That's her," a woman's voice whispered. "Margaret Ashford, the one whose husband. I know who she is." "Patricia," another voice interrupted sharply. It was Mrs. Eleanor Thornton, the town's oldest resident at 87, a widow who everyone respected and feared in equal measure. And I suggest you think very carefully before finishing that sentence. I turned around to see Mrs. Thornton, barely 5 feet tall, glaring up at Patricia Morrison, the mayor's wife, the queen bee of Millbrook gossip. I was simply. Patricia began. "You were simply about to spread more malicious gossip about a young woman who's shown more courage and character than anyone in this town," Mrs. Thornton said loudly, her voice carrying through the entire shop. Everyone stopped and stared. Margaret Ashford was a victim of fraud and betrayal. Yet she's worked harder than any 2 men to pay debts that weren't even her responsibility. She supported her parents through impossible circumstances. She's built a small business through sheer determination. And all you people have done is judge her for something that was done to her, not by her. The shop was silent. Patricia Morrison's face turned red. Mrs. Thornton turned to me then, her stern expression softening. "Margaret, dear, I'd like to place an order. I'm hosting my garden party next month, about 50 ladies, and I'd like you to provide the desserts. Can you handle that?" I was speechless. Mrs. Thornton's annual garden party was the social event of the season. Everyone who was anywhere attended. For her to hire me, yes, I managed to say, "Yes, I can handle that. Excellent. Come by my house tomorrow, and we'll discuss the details and payment. I pay fair rates for quality work." She looked around the shop pointedly. "And I expect everyone here will attend. After all, it would be terribly rude to refuse an invitation from an old woman." She walked out, leaving behind a shop full of stunned people and one very grateful woman on the verge of tears. That garden party changed everything. My dears, I baked for 2 weeks straight 40 lemon drizzle cakes, 60 treacle tarts, 100 chocolate biscuits, 3 dozen Victoria sponges. I used every recipe I knew, stayed up until dawn, worked until my hands ached. And on the day of the party, I delivered everything personally. arranged on borrowed silver platters, each piece perfect. The ladies at that party, the same women who'd crossed the street to avoid me, were forced to eat my food, to acknowledge that it was delicious, to ask where Mrs. Thornton had found such a talented baker. And Mrs. Thornton, bless her, announced loudly to everyone present, "This is all thanks to Margaret Ashford, who I believe is the finest baker in Yorkshire, and she's available for hire." The orders started flooding in after that. Birthday parties, anniversary celebrations, Sunday teas. I couldn't keep up with demand. I needed help. That's when I made a bold decision. In 1972, I took out a small business loan properly, legally, in my own name, with my own plan, and rented a small shop space on Market Street. It had been empty for 2 years, the windows dusty, the inside needing work. But the rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect. I called it Margaret's Kitchen. I couldn't afford employees, so I did everything myself. I'd bake from 4 a.m. until noon, then open the shop from noon until 6 p.m. I sold my cakes and tarts, but I also started offering fresh bread, scones, and meat pies. I made everything from scratch, everything with care. It was exhausting. There were days I was so tired I'd fall asleep standing up. Days when I questioned whether I could keep going. But every time I wanted to quit, I'd remember that hotel room, Robert's cold eyes, the sound of the door closing as he walked away. I'd remember Father Michael telling me to forgive and submit. I'd remember Patricia Morrison's whispers and sneers, and I'd keep going. By 1973, Margaret's Kitchen was profitable. By 1974, I'd paid off half my debts. By 1975, I'd hired 2 employees, young women from the next town over, who needed work and didn't care about my history. By 1976, I'd paid off all the debts and bought the shop building outright. But I also did something else during those years, my dears, something that surprised even me. I went back to school. I took evening classes at the technical college in the next town, studying business management and accounting. I wanted to understand what Robert had done, how he'd manipulated papers and signatures and trust. I wanted to make sure I'd never be vulnerable like that again. And I wanted to build something real, something sustainable, something that couldn't be taken away. I earned my certificate in 1977 at 32 years old. My mother framed it and hung it in the shop. My father cried when I graduated, tears of pride this time, not shame. Margaret's Kitchen expanded. I bought the building next door in 1978 and opened a small cafe. Then I started catering large events, weddings. Ironically enough, I hired more staff, trained them personally, built a reputation for quality, and reliability. In 1980, I finally got the divorce. Robert had been found living in Florida, working under an assumed name. The legal process was complex and expensive, but I had a lawyer now, a good one, and I was no longer the frightened girl in a wedding dress. The marriage was annulled based on fraud. I took back my maiden name, Margaret Cooper. By 1982, I had 5 locations across Yorkshire. By 1985, Margaret's Kitchen was a recognized brand, featured in the Yorkshire Post as From Hardship to Success, one woman's inspiring journey. But you know what meant more to me than any of that success, my dears? In 1978, I got a letter. It was forwarded from an old address. Had been traveling for months apparently. Addressed to Mrs. Margaret Ashford. Inside was a single piece of paper with shaky handwriting. Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've been sober for 6 months now, and in recovery I've had to face what I did to you. There's nothing I can say that would make it right. You were innocent and kind, and I destroyed that. I destroyed you. I'm sorry, Robert. I read it several times, sitting in my office above the original shop, looking out at Market Street, where people walked past my successful business, where my name was painted on the window in gold letters, and I realized something remarkable. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the burning rage that had fueled so many sleepless nights. I didn't even feel pity for him. I felt free. I wrote back. Just 3 sentences. I received your letter. Thank you for the apology. I wish you well in your recovery. Then I burned his letter in the fireplace and never thought of him again as anything more than a lesson learned, a chapter closed. The years that followed were good ones, my dears, really good. I met William in 1983. He was a widower, a carpenter, a gentleman who'd raised 3 daughters on his own after his wife died young. He walked into my cafe one morning for coffee and a scone, and we started talking. He came back the next day, and the next. 6 months later, he asked me to dinner. Just to be clear, I told him on that first date, I've been burned before. Badly. I'm not looking for someone to take care of me or fix me. I'm perfectly capable on my own. He smiled that warm smile I'd come to love and said, good. Because I'm not looking to rescue anyone. I'm just looking for someone interesting to share my life with. And you're the most interesting person I've met in years. We married in 1984. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends in Mrs. Thornton's garden. No white dress, no grand statements. Just 2 people who'd survived hardship and found joy again, promising to be honest with each other, to be partners. William never tried to change me or my business. He built me beautiful wooden display cases for my shops. He'd show up with lunch when I worked late. He listened to my ideas and challenged me when I was being stubborn. He was steady and true everything Robert had pretended to be. We had a good marriage, my dears. 28 years before cancer took him in 2012. I still miss him every day. But I also had something else that brought me immense joy. I became a mentor. Starting in the mid-1980s, I began offering apprenticeships to young women, especially those who'd found themselves in difficult circumstances, single mothers, women escaping bad situations, women who just needed a chance. I'd teach them to bake, to manage money, to run a business. Some stayed with me for years. Others moved on to start their own ventures. I was proud of every single one of them. One of them, Sarah, had been living in a women's shelter after leaving an abusive husband. She was terrified, beaten down, convinced she was worthless. I hired her in 1987 to wash dishes in the cafe kitchen. Within a year, she was my head baker. Within 3 years, she'd opened her own shop in Leeds. She now has a chain of 6 bakeries and credits me with saving her life. But I tell her the same thing I told you, my dears. I didn't save her. She saved herself. I just gave her the tools and believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. That's what real strength is. Not never falling, but getting back up. Not never being hurt, but healing and helping others heal. By the 1990s, Margaret's Kitchen had become something bigger than just a business. It had become a symbol proof that women didn't need men to rescue them, that we could build our own empires from the ashes of betrayal. I received awards. The Yorkshire Business Association named me Entrepreneur of the Year in 1994. The Queen sent me a letter congratulating me on my MBE in 1998 for services to business and community. Me, the woman who'd once sold treacle tarts door to door, whose hands had been cracked and bleeding from washing other people's laundry. But you know what moment meant the most? In 1999, I was giving a talk at a women's business conference in Manchester. There were about 200 women in the audience, young, old, all different backgrounds and situations. I was telling my story, explaining how that wedding night in 1967 had led to everything that came after. When I finished, a young woman in the front row stood up. She was crying. "Thank you," she said. "My husband just left me with 3 children and massive debts. I've been thinking about giving up, about how I'll never recover from this. But if you could do it, if you could build all this from nothing, then maybe I can too." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw myself at 22, devastated, scared, but not yet defeated. "You can," I told her, "and you will. Not because it'll be easy. It won't. Not because people will help you. Most won't. but because you're stronger than you know. Because you have to be. Because your children are watching. And you'll show them what resilience looks like. She nodded, wiping her tears, and sat back down. After the conference, 15 women came up to me with their own stories of betrayal, hardship, survival. We talked for hours. I gave them my card, told them to call if they ever needed advice or just someone to listen. 3 of them ended up working for me. 2 started their own businesses. All of them are still in my life today, decades later. That's the real legacy, my dears. Not the money, or the awards, or the business empire. It's the web of women supporting women, believing in each other, refusing to let anyone else's cruelty define our worth. I'm 76 now, sitting in my garden on this beautiful afternoon, finally sharing this story with you. William has been gone 13 years, but I feel his presence sometimes, especially out here among the roses he planted for me. Margaret's kitchen is still running, though I retired from day-to-day management 10 years ago. My protégée Sarah now owns the company. I sold it to her at a price she could afford, because that's how this works. You lift others up. You pass the torch. I have 2 grandchildren. From William's side, his daughter's children, who call me Grandma Maggie. They're in university now, studying business and culinary arts, wanting to follow in my footsteps. I tell them they should forge their own paths, but I'm secretly delighted. As for Robert, I heard through the grapevine that he died in 2005, alone in a studio apartment in Miami, estranged from everyone who'd ever known him. Part of me felt sad when I heard that, not for him specifically, but for the waste of a life, for the fact that he'd never found whatever he was looking for. When he destroyed so many people in 1967, but mostly, my dears, I felt grateful that his betrayal had forced me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. Grateful that his cruelty had taught me resilience. Grateful that the worst night of my life had ultimately led to the best years. My father died in 1989, having seen me rebuild everything Robert had destroyed and more. His last words to me were, "I'm so proud of you, Margaret, so very proud." My mother lived until 2003, spending her final years in a cottage I bought for her, tending roses even more beautiful than the ones she'd grown before everything fell apart. Mrs. Eleanor Thornton, my unlikely champion, died in 1992 at 108 years old. I catered her funeral, as she'd requested in her will. She left me a note that I keep framed in my office. "Dear Margaret, never let anyone make you small. You were always meant for greatness." E.T. Patricia Morrison, the mayor's wife who'd whispered about me. She came to my cafe in 2001 and apologized. Really apologized. Her own daughter had gone through a difficult divorce, and she'd finally understood what I'd endured. I accepted her apology because holding onto anger only hurts yourself, not the person you're angry with. Father Michael eventually left the priesthood under complicated circumstances. I felt vindicated, but also saddened by how many people had trusted him, had taken his guidance as gospel, only to discover he was as flawed and fallible as anyone. The shop where I'd bought that beef in 1971, where Mrs. Thornton had publicly defended me, that's where my main cafe is now. I bought the building in 1988 and renovated it, keeping a small brass plaque by the door in memory of Eleanor Thornton, who taught me that one person's courage can change everything. You know, my dears, people ask me sometimes if I'd change anything. If I could go back to that hotel room in 1967, knowing what I know now, would I still marry Robert? And the answer is complicated. Would I choose to go through that pain, that humiliation, that decade of struggle? No, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But would I give up everything that came after the strength, the business, the women I've helped, the life I built, the person I became? Never, not for anything. Robert's betrayal didn't break me. It forged me. Like steel in fire, I came out stronger, harder, more resilient. I learned that I didn't need anyone to complete me, to validate me, to give my life meaning. I could do all that myself. I learned that the people who judge you in your darkest moments aren't the ones who matter. The ones who matter are the Mrs. Thorntons of the world, the unexpected allies who see your worth when you can barely see it yourself. I learned that success isn't about money or status or what people think of you. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and being proud of who you see. It's about sleeping soundly because you know you've been honest and kind and true. I learned that forgiveness isn't about absolving someone else's guilt. It's about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying their mistakes. Robert's apology in 1978 didn't heal me. I'd already healed myself by then, but accepting it allowed me to let go of the last threads of connection to that pain. Most importantly, my dears, I learned that no one can steal your worth unless you let them. Robert stole my money, my reputation, my trust. But he couldn't steal my intelligence, my work ethic, my resilience, my capacity for joy. Those were always mine, always would be mine. So if you're watching this today and you're going through something difficult, whether it's betrayal or loss or hardship, or just feeling lost and alone, please hear me when I say this. You are stronger than you know. You are capable of more than you imagine. And the fact that someone hurt you, used you, or underestimated you says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. Get up. Dust yourself off and start building the life you deserve, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one small victory at a time. You might be washing laundry and selling tarts door to door right now. But who knows, maybe 30 years from now, you'll be sitting in your garden, drinking tea, telling your own story of survival and triumph, because that's what we do, my dears. We survive, we adapt, we overcome, we thrive, and we help other women do the same. Thank you for listening to me today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next stories. Share with someone who might be needing a little hope. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments.